Yes, I've been duped, you've been duped, we've been fooled by big food. I am definitely a victim of this, and that's what we're going to be talking today during This Week in the Clinic. So happy to be back to talk about this. I think it's a big subject. I think we're going to cover a lot of ground. It's a super interesting place to go, and we're going to talk about the top nutrition lies everyone believes. And of course, by the end of this episode, we will have to change the title from everyone to some people, because you guys will be enlightened, or maybe you already all are enlightened. So we're going to cover quite a bit of ground. As I said, I'm super excited for this. We're going to talk about why calories don't count, right? Why they're not that important. We're going to talk about milk. We're going to talk about orange juice. We're going to talk about whole grains. We're going to talk about fat. We're going to talk about Red Bull. We're going to talk about advertising, big food, why we've all been duped, how they dupe us, why they dupe us, and it's going to open up some serious cans of worms. So I'm really excited to bring this to you. I'm here every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can catch these recordings anytime thereafter for This Week in the Clinic. I'm Josh Gitalis. I'm a clinical nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner, and I run and operate a practice here in Toronto where I work with people with all sorts of complex health issues, in person and online. And I also run a functional nutrition certification program where you can check out more information on that at functionalnutrition.ca. So every week I learn lots of different lessons working with real human beings, okay? Real people with real issues, with real questions. And I bring those lessons that I've learned throughout the week to you guys so that you can learn from all the lessons that I learn on an individual basis. So I am often discussing various food pieces of information with my clients, right? Educating them and updating and upgrading their information from what they've been taught in the media by big food to what is the actual truth. And unfortunately, advertising and the way the world is set up to work against us. Big food has one thing in mind, and that is, can anyone guess? Money. They want to figure out how to get their biggest bang for their buck, right? How can we create foods that don't spoil, that last on the shelf, that people buy and eat on a regular basis? So they have scientists in labs figuring out the best combinations and best ways to do this. But unfortunately, that's at the expense of nutrition. And of course, food is there to give us sustenance. It's there to give us nutrition. It's there to fuel and operate this wonderful machine called the human body. So how have we been duped? That's what we're going to dive into. We're going to start with one bonus thing that we've been duped on, for those of you who are tuning in early. And the first one, we're going to get right into it, is calories don't count. Okay? So I'm just going to log in here on Facebook, get all set up for you guys. So calories don't count. You know, there's been, I think that's one of the biggest things that we've been duped on in the media, is that calories are what matters. Now, there's a wonderful book out there. It's called Undiet. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I know the author quite well. Her name is Megan Telper. In fact, she's my wife, so I know her very well. And she wrote this wonderful book a number of years ago. One of my favorite pictures that I've ever found in any nutrition book is in this book. And I'm not being biased. This is the actual truth. I show it to clients all the time. So, I don't know if you can see it there. It's on page number 30. And basically what it's showing is it's showing some broccoli, a plate of Doritos, some M&Ms, a little chocolate bar, some Coca-Cola, chickpeas, avocado, eggs, and bread. Okay? See that? And those are all 200 calories. okay? So you can either have a plate of Doritos or a plate of avocado, and you'll get the same amount of calories. So what's calories? It's energy. It gives us energy, right? But there's a lot of other stuff in the food that comes in those packages, like vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, where the Doritos don't really have that much. The avocado is going to be packed with those. And those are the types of activators that help us actually use the calories in a effective way, okay? So there's a lot more to food than we sometimes make it out to be when we try to break it down in the scientific lab and put all the components on labels, calories being one of the worst things. So the first thing, the bonus one for those of you who showed up early, is calories don't count because there's a lot of other factors in our food. We too often use what's called a reductionist type of mentality when it comes to food. You know, what's that single thing? What's that single vitamin? What's that single mineral? On food labels here in Canada, and I believe also in the US, they really even just hone in on a few vitamins and minerals. Like on most labels, it'll show the vitamin C content or the amount of sodium, protein, fats, carbs, iron sometimes. But what about all the others? What about the thousands of phytonutrients that are out there? Doesn't account for them. So calories, we don't want to pay too much attention to those. Now, as I get started here, I just want to do a call out to you who are attending live right now. What things have you seen in the media, advertisements, TV, billboards, even the grocery store, that you think are healthy, or that maybe you used to think that were healthy, and now that you know they aren't healthy, that they were trying to sell you? What types of ideas were they trying to sell you? And I'd like to check back in on the comments and maybe comment myself on a couple of those if we don't cover them. So the second one is that milk is for everyone. Everyone should drink milk. I mean, this is one of the biggest lies, again, that we've been sold. So I just want to pull up some statistics here for you. And this is actually in one of my blogs about the lie about dairy. You can just Google that, or maybe we'll post up a link here in a moment. But African Americans, about 97 to 100% of them are lactose intolerant. Asians, 90 to 100% are lactose intolerant. People of Jewish descent, 60 to 80% of them are lactose intolerant. Mediterraneans, 60 to 90% of them are lactose intolerant. Mexicans, 70 to 80% are lactose intolerant. Middle Europeans, 10 to 20%, so they're in the lower end. North American blacks, 70 to 75%. North American Caucasians, 7 to 15%. And Northern Europeans, 1 to 5%. Lactose intolerant, yet it's on our Canada Food Guide, saying that everyone should get a number of servings of this stuff daily. Well, humans are the only mammals on the planet that consume dairy after we're weaned, right? The only ones. So that alone tells us, hey, you know, maybe we don't need to have dairy. Maybe there's another way we can get that nutrition. And unfortunately, one of the consequences of people consuming dairy, so many of those people, is it causes all sorts of other problems like digestive upset, something called small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Dairy's been linked to inflammatory bowel diseases. And what we give the most attention to in developed countries is bone health and dairy. So there was two studies that showed, one was published in 1994 in Advanced Nutritional Research, and others published in the Journal of Nutrition in 1986, that showed as dairy consumption increases, bone density decreases, hip fracture risk increases. So in Hong Kong and Singapore, where they have the lowest dairy consumption, they actually have the lowest amount of hip fractures. So that alone right there tells us that, hey, dairy isn't necessary for bone health. I think that's enough to convince most people. There's still a lot more evidence as well that it's not necessary for bone health. It's all the other activators that are really important for bone health. So we need vitamin D, or else we're peeing out about 20 or 30 to 80% of our calcium is just going right through us if we have low vitamin D levels. Now, here's a question. This is a great thing to ponder to bring some clarity to the whole bone and dairy world. I think you would all agree that cows, where we get our dairy, or most of our dairy, unless you're getting it from sheep or goat, but cows are huge animals. They've got big bones, and those bones should be really strong, or else that animal is going to break a hip and fall over. Now, after a cow or a calf is weaned from their mother's milk, where do they get their calcium from? You can put that in the comment box. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Because dairy is something that's pushed on us. We're told that we should have 2 glasses of milk a day, typically. But there's a lot of other great sources of calcium. And we also have to appreciate it's not just calcium. We don't always want to revert back to this reductionist view. So does anyone out there know where cows are getting their calcium from? Melanie Connolly, thank you for joining us. She says grass. And what is grass? Grass is a green leafy vegetable. We don't really eat grass. Maybe we eat grass juice or something, but it's a green leafy vegetable. So green leafies have a ton of calcium, and that's where the cow gets all their calcium, and that's how the calcium gets into the milk. So next time someone says to you, well, where am I going to get my calcium? Just say, well, where do cows get their calcium? Okay, moving on. So drinking milk is the second lie that we were told. The first one, the bonus one, was for the people who showed up early, so you could go back and check that out. Next is cereal. Cereal is the breakfast of choice. We've been sold this idea that we have to wake up in the morning, you know, half asleep, get the cereal, pour it into a bowl, put the skim milk in the cereal, and that's a powerful breakfast. Well, most countries do not have cereal for breakfast, interestingly enough. Plus, we only started farming grains about 10,000 years ago, which isn't that long in our 2.6 million years of existence here. A bowl of carbs is going to spike your blood sugar first thing in the day. You're going to have a crash. If you're giving this to children, they don't really have a lot of self-control, and they just act out, right? So you're giving them their Frosted Flakes, you're giving them their skim milk. It's spiking their blood sugar. They go to school, they crash, they act out, they can't concentrate on work. And that snowballs when you're doing that every day. That can affect someone's whole life, the whole direction of their life, if they're having these hard carbohydrate breakfasts. When we want to have breakfast, we want a very high fat, very high protein breakfast to get some good energy into the body. That's going to burn slowly and very hot. Like a fire, you want to put a big log into the fire, not the kindling that burns up quickly. And that's going to sustain someone for a long period of time. So cereal is something that we want to get rid of. High in sugar, it's very high in carbohydrates, and it's just going to put you on that blood sugar roller coaster. So Tony the Tiger, you need to go back to the wilderness. There's no place for you here in our commercials or in the city. All right, Tony, we'll see you later. So next, another thing that we've been sold is every morning should start off with a glass of orange juice. Now, I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I look out the window, and I don't think I've ever seen a fruit tree here. Well, we have apple trees and pear trees and whatnot, but the citrus just don't exist here. If I never traveled or saw TV or, read a book, I wouldn't even know oranges existed. So in our part of the world, orange juice shouldn't even exist. Oranges shouldn't even exist. Now, of course, we can access those because of, transportation and whatnot. It gives us the ability to have more nutrients, but we were sold that we should have a glass of orange juice in the morning. Now, there's a fantastic book that was published by Alyssa Hamilton called Squeezed. Actually, for those of you who are joining me right now, you'll be happy to know Alyssa is going to come on my show this week in the clinic. We have her booked in for a date coming up, so stay tuned. She wrote 2 great books. One is Squeezed and one is Got Milked, which we already talked about Got Milked, or Milk. She wrote a whole book on it. Look at all this information on why we shouldn't be consuming milk. But Squeezed is all about the orange juice industry and how basically at one time of the year, oranges are ripe, they come off the trees, we harvest a huge amount of those oranges, we take them, juice them, put them in these huge 1,000,000-liter vats, pasteurize them, so cook the crap out of them. Then we extract the flavors from them, and scientists in the lab determine what's the best combination of flavor for that orange juice. Then they put the flavor packs back in. So there's these flavor packs that different companies use depending on which flavor they want. Which is why you go to the grocery store, you have 10 different companies that all say 100% orange juice. It's true, but they're in different combinations of flavors because a scientist has figured that out, what the best flavor is. Tropicana tends to be the one that's one of the most popular ones because it tastes more like orange juice. So we're actually not consuming the original orange juice. Now on top of that, oranges, as many people know, have vitamin C in it. Now they're not the best source of vitamin C. Red peppers have way more vitamin C than oranges, believe it or not. But vitamin C is very prone to damage from heat. So you pasteurize it, you destroy all the vitamin C, right? And you're killing the nutrients. And then you're just ending up with a glass of sugar water, which is basically what orange juice is. Now, we all know the difference between processed orange juice that we get in a Tetra Pak or a can or a jar or something, and freshly squeezed orange juice. There is nothing like a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. And why is that? Our taste buds know the difference. Our taste buds knows when we're consuming nutrition. Okay? With a fresh glass of orange juice, we're getting tons of phytonutrients, we're getting vitamin C, we're getting very powerful juice. So if you're ever going to have a glass of juice, make sure it's a fresh one. That's another way we've been duped. They sold us that we should have a glass of orange juice in the morning. Okay, moving on. A serving of fruit can be consumed as a gummy snack. We see these gummies all the time in the snack section, and they say, oh, provides 1 serving of fruit, provides 2 servings of fruit. It's another situation where we have this reductionist point of view that we can actually concentrate certain aspects of food and get that same thing in a processed food. It's not possible. We cannot hack Mother Nature. Mother Nature is perfect, and we have to get food as it comes. So gummy snacks need to go. Real fruits need to come in. And there's lots of great, creative, cool ways we can do that as well. I'm just going to check in here with some of the comments. Diane's mentioning that orange juice equals sugar. It sure does. There's not much left in it. Nars says vegan protein powder. Maybe we'll talk about that in a moment. Melanie says cereals are always trying to make themselves look healthy, and it's usually just processed junk with tons of sugar. Usually, I would say almost always. I love when they say 100% whole grains or gluten-free, etc., as it makes them healthy, yes. And we're going to talk about actually why gluten-free isn't necessarily healthy in a moment. And we've done an episode on gluten before. Yeah, so again, thank you all for your awesome comments. Now, the next one we're going to move to is margarine. Margarine is better than butter. Now, how many years have we been consuming butter? Anyone? I would say hundreds, if not thousands of years we've been consuming butter. Butter has been around for as long as cows have been around and as long as we've been milking them cows. So butter was never the villain. If we go back to when we all started to become fat phobic, it was actually from the work of a gentleman by the name of Ansel Keys, who, again, another person that duped us all, thinking that fat was bad. Now, we went 30, 40, 50 years thinking that fat was bad. Heart disease rates skyrocketed. And now we're saying, oops, I think fat is good, and now fat is everywhere. And Walker, butter does make everything better, I gotta say. Butter is delicious. And an offshoot of that, ghee, is also absolutely delicious, which takes out the dairy components of that butter for people who are sensitive or don't want that flavor. So butter is the way. So margarine, I've got a whole article on it as well. Perhaps we can post that, why Becel isn't heart healthy. It all started back in the 1800s when Napoleon III was looking for a butter alternative that was cheap. And he basically came up with this combo that was like beef fat and skim milk, which tasted disgusting. And then this thing ensued on trying to find a good alternative. Eventually we came up with margarine. Eventually we came up with Becel. Now if you look at some of the ingredients in Becel, first I'm going to list off the ingredients in butter, and then I'm going to list off the ingredients in Becel, okay? So the ingredients in butter are butter, okay? Those are the ingredients of butter. Now we're going to look at the ingredients in Becel. Canola oil, sunflower oil, modified palm and palm kernel oil, whey protein concentrate, soy lecithin, vegetable monoglycerides, potassium sorbate, vegetable color. Okay, why are they putting color in there? Because it probably looks disgusting unless they make it a little bit yellow and add some good color to it. But I'm not done. Artificial flavor, citric acid, vitamin A palmitate, vitamin D, and vitamin E. So why are all those in there? Well, first, and I see Joy has joined us too, and it is pretty disgusting. We're getting some long ooze happening. But why do they, how do they make this up? Well, first they start with a base of different oils that can maybe become solid at room temperature. These are often non-organic, usually GMO, like canola. And they're inflammatory, so they have high omega-6s in them, okay? Then they add all sorts of things to adjust the texture, to adjust the color, to adjust the flavor. And then to top it all off, they have some preservatives like citric acid. And then finally, at the end, they put vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin E in there. Why are they putting those three vitamins in our butter? They're putting them in there, in our margarine. They're putting them in there to mimic what people should be eating in butter, which has all those fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin E. A, D, E, K are the fat-soluble vitamins. They're already in butter. So the bottom line is that Becel, which we've been sold is heart healthy, is actually quite the opposite. We want to go back to butter. Now, people are so scared of saturated fat that might be in butter. Well, butter, the predominant saturated fat in butter is butyric acid, which is a very short saturated fat, about 4 carbons long, and that doesn't really present much problems in the body because it's so short. So going into the chemistry a little bit, oftentimes we say, oh, all saturated fats are bad, but that's like saying all humans are bad. There's good humans and there's bad humans. It's like saying that, it's just a very blanket statement, So there's good fats and there's bad fats. There's fats that heal and there's fats that kill. I can't find my book, but there's a book by Udo Erasmus, one of my textbooks when I was in school, called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. So there's good ones and there's bad ones. So Becel, another item we've been sold as being good for us. Or margarine, okay? We want to go back to butter. We want to go back to what we've been eating. The next lie you've been sold is that 12 grains are better than 1. So, oftentimes, and I have to pull out my handy Loblaws flyer for this one, I get these things in the mail and I just laugh. I mean, I can't believe that this is what we call food. So we've got a Country Harvest bread down here, which is, it's advertising as 12 grains, But what if all those grains are refined? What if the main ingredient in that bread is white flour? Then it really doesn't matter what grains are in there. And plus, we already spoke about with cereal why we don't want to have such a high-carb breakfast. So we want to stay away from that. Hey, look. Look what's right there. Our friend. They sell. Front page of the flyer. What else do we have here? Well, we have here in Canada, President's Choice is a company that makes all sorts of foods. They do some good stuff. They do some not so good stuff. They actually have a good, really comprehensive organic line. But here they have what's called the Blue Menu. And the Blue Menu is really interesting because they advertise it as being low fat. They advertise it as being low calorie. And of course, we don't necessarily want that. So we spoke about earlier when we were looking in the diet, is that calories are very different depending on where they're coming from. A plate of Doritos is very different than a plate of avocado. And the Blue Menu advertises low calorie and low fat, but if you're not getting your calories from fat, where are you getting them from? You have to get them from somewhere, and you're oftentimes trading them for carbs. So I would have to say that the Blue Menu is way, way, way behind the times. What other goodies do we have here? Hey, look. We have Pampers. Now, we're talking about food today, but Pampers are bleached with chlorine. This is something that we talk about, actually chlorine in detail, in mine and Megan's Healthy at Home course. You can check out more at healthyathome.me. And these are just more chemicals. So there's so many chemicals that were being sold. Chlorine can get absorbed into the skin and can cause all sorts of health issues. It affects the thyroid, for example, which is really damaging, and we're giving this or putting this on our kids' bodies really early in life, like from the Pampers. So I also have an article, a blog, entitled "Why Are We So Sick?" And it really just talks about what's happening to our children within their first year of life. Okay? So the best thing to do with your flyers that you get that are advertising food, like milk, which we spoke about, is just to take them and rip them up. Throw them in the garbage. Or, even better, put a sign on your mailbox saying no junk mail, please, which is what we do. Okay, moving on. The next one is Red Bull gives you energy. Red Bull, the other myth that they sell is that it gives you wings. That's, I think, their motto. Well, Red Bull is an energy drink, and I'm curious, where does energy come from? Does it come from a drink? Does it come from a can? Or does it come from real food? Nature's perfect. It packaged up these little bundles of energy for us called fruits and vegetables, seeds and nuts, so that we can eat them and sustain this body. Energy does not come from a chemical like caffeine. So we have to ask the question, if we're getting energy by consuming an energy drink, by consuming a coffee, by consuming caffeine, by consuming chocolate, by consuming yerba mate, if that's our energy, what's happening in the body? And what's happening is that caffeine is fooling our body into thinking that it has more energy. It has some actions on some of the receptors in our brains, and it also stimulates our adrenal glands to release more of those stress hormones that we all have way too much of to give us more energy, like adrenaline. Okay? So I hate to burst some of your bubbles, but Red Bull is not an energy drink. It's really bad for you, actually. Okay, moving on. Fat is bad. We already spoke about that. So the last two things I want to talk about, which might blow your mind coming from me, is that gluten-free and organic aren't necessarily healthy. Now, the last episode I did, either 1 or 2 episodes ago, we spoke all about gluten and why we should be avoiding gluten. So if you want a refresher, you really want to dive deep into the gluten conversation, please go back and check out that episode. I think it's an essential one for everyone to watch. But our discussion today is talking about food claims and what you've been sold. So because so many people have become sensitive to gluten, the industry responds appropriately, and we have gluten-free everywhere. We have gluten-free breads, gluten-free bagels, gluten-free pastas, gluten-free snacks, gluten-free restaurants, gluten-free shampoo. Although I don't really eat my shampoo. But we have gluten-free everything. And what's happening is we're giving up one potential problem for another. And the other problem here is a lot of processed foods to actually make gluten-free products that mimic the gluten-containing products. So a lot of these breads are loaded with starch, they're loaded with preservatives, they're loaded with binders, they're loaded with things that are also going to cause similar issues or different issues. They're saying that people who go gluten-free have higher levels of arsenic in their blood. Why? Because they eat a lot more rice, and rice has an affinity for arsenic, more the non-organic type of rice. So we always have to be careful when we give up one food where we're going elsewhere to get those calories and to get those nutrients. So we want to be very wary of gluten-free products because they're usually quite processed. And then finally, organic food, right? So organic food isn't necessarily healthy. You know, sometimes people say to me, here, take these crackers or try this cookie or something. It's organic. And I say, well, thank you. You have great intentions. I appreciate it. But it's loaded with sugar, or it's just a refined grain. So organic doesn't necessarily mean healthy, just to confuse you a little bit more. So we need to be careful about these types of advertisements when we're looking at specific foods. Costco has blown up their organic section, and I think that's a really great place to kind of step back for a moment and say, because that's organic isn't necessarily healthy. And it all comes down to whole, real foods. Food is your best medicine or your slowest form of poison. That's what today's all about. It's all about food. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish up with a few little tips from one of my favorite books, Michael Pollan's Food Rules. I love this book. If you don't have it, check it out. There's so many great little tips in here. It's a very thin book, and it's a fun read. So I'm just going to read off a few of my favorites here. First of all, he's got about 60 rules in here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. And I would say at this point, we might want to go to the great-great-grandmother. Okay? Avoid food products containing ingredients that no ordinary human would keep in their pantry. I do not keep a jar of citric acid in my pantry, as we saw in the Basil margarine. I don't know about you, but it just doesn't have a place there. Avoid food products that make health claims. We talked about the blue label, right? We also have the heart check on our Basil. You know, real food is going to serve your body in a real way, and it doesn't need any health claims. You know, what's healthier, the blue label packaged dinner or broccoli? Well, the broccoli doesn't have any health claims because no one's making money off the broccoli. Don't ingest food made in places where everyone requires to wear a surgical cap, and I think that's a great place to end. So we've been duped over and over again. We've been taught to drink milk, that's healthy. What we discussed today is that most of the world just can't even drink milk. They're lactose intolerant. We've been taught to have orange juice. We've been taught to have these high carbohydrate breakfasts. We've been taught to avoid fat. We've been taught to avoid eggs. We've been taught that energy drinks give you energy. We've been taught that 12 grains are better than one. We've been taught all these different lies, and we need to open up our eyes and realize that these companies don't have our health in mind. They have their dollars in mind and their shareholders in mind. So stepping back, reevaluating some of these claims is a great way to ensure that your health is going to be maximized and the health of your friends and family will be maximized as well. Remember, the person who cooks in the family is the doctor of the family. They have the opportunity 3 times a day at least to give something that is a beautiful form of medicine or a slow form of poison. On that note, I'm going to check in to see if there's any questions or comments here. Sue is saying this is so good. It's always the big buck. Yeah, that's very true. And thank you for your feedback, Sue. Melanie says fruits and vegetables are gluten-free. They sure are. So you can eat lots of those and be sure you're not going to get anything that contains gluten. Sue says, looking forward to share this with my followers. I often take the flyers out. Well, thank you so much, Sue, for sharing it. And for those of you who think this might benefit someone, there's a little subtle way to do it. You just, in the comment box, you put their name. You tag them. So it's a great way to kind of help people learn this information without you telling them directly. And sometimes they need to hear it from someone else. So feel free to tag them, to share it with people that you know as well. Rory says if it comes in a packet, don't eat it. I think that's a great way to go about finding and eating food. And question from Vaishali. Hey Vaishali, it's been a while. So she asked, what is the best breakfast for kids? So I'm going to answer that in a couple ways. First of all, I have an audio on my website which you can purchase, which is like $8, of a lecture I did on healthy eating for kids. But for kids, some of my favorite breakfasts are smoothies. I love smoothies for kids because you can make them taste awesome. You can put so much good stuff in it. They think it's fun. They enjoy the colors of it. And they can be super nutritious, super high in fat and protein. So I love a good smoothie for myself, actually, and also for kids. Start with a good protein. Add a really good fat, like a tablespoon or 2, maybe some nut butter. And then add some, fruit to make it taste good, like berries. Like blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries. And if it's a little too tart, you can add a little bit of honey or maple syrup in there to sweeten it up and get that in their body. I think that's a great breakfast. Another really great breakfast for kids is eggs. Eggs are amazing for the brain, amazing for the nervous system, very high in protein. They balance the blood sugar. There's also great pancake recipes which are really high in protein, not really like grain heavy, but they're more like, they use legumes or beans as a base. They use more eggs as a base, and those can be good too for those mornings you want to do a pancake morning. Megan has a great recipe on her website for chickpea pancakes. They're super easy and they're really nutritious. So those are a couple of my favorite breakfasts. Also, don't be afraid to step outside the box a little bit and to try, this might shock some of you, sardines. Some kids will like sardines. Even, if you mix them up with some stuff, they might eat it. Or some salmon. Smoked salmon can be great. And then there's lots of other options out there. So those are some good ways to get a high protein, high fat breakfast into your children. Melanie says, my favorite is when people say, oh, I'm sorry when I say I'm gluten dairy free. There is nothing to feel sorry about. I love it and eat amazingly. So funny how the mindset of people is so skewed. Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually experience the same thing when I go to parties and then maybe there's a dessert table and I don't take anything. I'm just not interested in it. And people say to me, don't you feel like you're missing out? Like you don't want any dessert? I'm like, no, I don't even crave it. I don't even feel like I'm missing out at all. Now, I didn't used to be like that because I definitely didn't grow up on the healthy diet. I call that my first life. But eventually, you do adjust and you change and you don't even desire a lot of these foods. Thank you for bringing that up. Sue says, pancakes, 1 banana and 4 eggs, blend well and cooked on medium heat. There you go. Doesn't get much easier than that, and you're most welcome, Vaishali. And I want to say hi to Vaishali's son, who's also listening. How's it going? So thank you all so much for joining me. We'll end there. We just, for those of you who joined a little bit later, caught the tail end, you can watch the whole recording of this at any point. It gets recorded right away and is available on my Facebook page 24/7. We do this every week, this week in the clinic, where I take the lessons I learn throughout the week in the clinic working with my clients and bring them to you so that you can learn from them. We've got some amazing shows coming up. As I spoke to you today about a couple books, Squeezed and Got Milked, I actually have Alyssa Hamilton booked for one of my shows. Joy McCarthy joined us today, and Walker joined us of Joyous Health, and Joy is going to be joining us as well in upcoming weeks. I've also got a few other people booked in, and I think we're kicking it up a notch with some of the guests. So I'm super excited. I love your questions. I'm going to be checking in on this for the next 48 hours. So if you have any questions that I missed or I didn't get to, feel free to post them. I'll chime in. And remember, the best way to get started is to get started. Take this information, apply it, and make your health much better. All right, thank you again, and have a healthy and happy day. Take care.